Sekeres and Price, a special emergency edition NHL trade deadline 2026, coming to you from the Nation Network studio here at the historic Wall Center. And as always, a presentation of Bet365. Matt Sekeres with Blake Price, Mike Rogerson, hitting switches and conducting things. First of all, good morning. It's
morning.
early.
Yeah.
If you're a regular consumer of the show, you may have heard the fact that we are all now tending to be early to bed, early to rise types. And so like a 9:30 trade from the Vancouver Canucks is right on the borderline in terms of, do we attack this tonight or do we attack it in the morning? So here we are, just after 7, bright and early on a rainy Vancouver morning. How are you?
I'm good. I am hopeful for more action to come here later on today, and yet something tells me the Canucks have dusted their hands off and might think their work is done.
Don't even say that. I don't even want to hear that.
Well, no one probably does, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Blake, we are 5 good hours away from the Canucks dusting their hands off, kicking feet up, and saying we're done for the day.
You have confidence in that, really?
Yeah, I think they're going to make another trade here. I would think that Teddy Bluger, at minimum, is going to be dealt.
Yeah.
Anyways, what brings us here 7 a.m. or just past on a Friday morning in Vancouver? It is the trade last night of winger Conor Garland to the Columbus Blue Jackets for a pair of draft choices, the 2026 third-round choice and a 2028 second-round choice. Now, as we've been saying all along here, going back to the Quinn Hughes trade in December, we can tell you where this draft pick would land today. We cannot tell you where this draft pick would land in June when it's all said and done. But as of right now, that third-round pick in the 2026 NHL entry draft would be the 80th overall selection for the Vancouver Canucks. And, of course, much to be determined with that 2028 second-round pick.
Yeah.
Reacts.
It's too bad because in the moments right after the trade, before we knew which second-round pick it was, we just knew it was a second and a third. And I started to get a little bit excited here, Matt, because they don't have their second this year. They've got St. Louis Blues second this year. And as we know, the Blues are terrible. And that is effectively a first-round pick if it was the Blues. Alas, hopes were dashed months after, and we found out it's the 2028. And here's the thing, and people were like, what, are you just impatient? No, I'm not just impatient. Again, it's the difference between a 34th overall pick, most likely in the Blues, and who knows? Like, I don't think Columbus is getting terrible in the next 2 years. I think they're at worst a mushy middle team. And if they're a mushy middle team, it could be a 55th overall pick. And that's a difference of 20 spots. So to me, that's a big delineation point. And
yes,
if you had told me it was that Blue second round, I'm ecstatic for the Canucks.
I am with you. To me, that would have shifted the balance actually from trade lose to trade win.
Yeah, and I wouldn't call it a lose for me. It's an on par, like it's a fine.
Oh, Blake.
That's where I'm at right now.
So, first of all, that second round pick, the Blues pick that he speaks of, as of this morning, would be 35th overall, but it's even better because Ottawa is forfeiting its first round pick, or at least that is the case, right? So it'd be 34th overall. So, yeah, as you say, effectively a late round pick. The problem with a 2028 second round pick is, second round picks are minimum 3, more likely 4 or 5 years away. So, you're sitting here looking at 6-7 years before that is a player. And look, I can understand why Columbus wouldn't want to part with the second round pick this year. It's funny too, because yesterday I was sitting there on my patio, Blake, looking at teams with draft capital, and I noticed the Columbus Blue Jackets and what they had. And I thought, I wonder. Anyways, look, the Vancouver Canucks quite clearly were extremely motivated to move this player at this moment, and even roped the agent into play, according to Rick Dhaliwal, to find Conor Garland a fit. Blake, I'm saying it's a trade lose just because we were told yesterday by insiders that there were a number of teams that were on Conor Garland, right? We had heard him linked to Columbus. We had heard him linked to the Islanders. We had heard him linked to his hometown Boston Bruins, to the New Jersey Devils. There were even insider reports last night that Washington and San Jose. So when I sit there and I look at what we could only believe was the market for Conor Garland, which was a number of teams, I think to myself, okay, of all those suitors, I understand going goalless in 23 games, having not scored on a goalie in 30 games, was going to be reflected in the price. He's having a horrible season, and while there are many out there with other NHL teams that are willing to just dismiss horrible seasons from Vancouver Canucks because it's the Vancouver Canucks and what's going right there this year, absolutely nothing. That I do believe that was baked into this price, as was that contract extension, 6x6, which kicks in on July 1st. And look, I viewed it as more of a neutral contract extension. I think you could have made that point that it would be a market value contract for a middle six player. Probably not age great in the last 2 to 3 years, but in the interim, get a good, solid NHL player. Boy, they, I guess, were unable to make that case to suitors, Blake, because this is a very fertile market with very high prices being paid. And I don't think you can argue the Columbus Blue Jackets paid a high price for Conor Garland.
No, they didn't pay a high price at all. They took on the weight of the contract, as you said, and $6 million per year for 6 more years in past this year. Remember, that hasn't kicked in. A 6x6 that starts next year. You're asking the acquiring team to take on quite a bit of responsibility there for a guy who, as we chronicled, hasn't scored since the middle of December. And he looks out of touch a little bit here. He looks out of sorts. Now, again, could be the Vancouver Canucks factor here. Everybody looks terrible on a terrible team for the most part. But when you're trying to trade him, you've got to pay for that downgrade. And I think the Canucks were forced to pay for that downgrade of the player. Now, getting off the contract is no small issue here for the Vancouver Canucks. They hope to be competitive within that 6-year window. And right now, that would probably be outside the prime years for Conor Garland. So
that's correct.
That's the good news here. When he's 33 and his production really starts to wane, that's when the Canucks are going to be wanting to be competitive. And he would have been a drag on that, and he will no longer be.
I absolutely agree that they had to move Conor Garland before July 1st and his no-move clause kicking in. I will also remind everybody, we had this discussion yesterday, Blake, this isn't their last opportunity with some of these guys, right? You do have the draft, the build up to the new league year on July 1st. So it looks to me also that they panicked a little bit with no goals in 23 and 1 goal on a goalie in 30 and said, let's cut bait here before the value sinks even further, which is unfortunate. But it's funny because, and I hear this playing out with other trades and other markets and other fan bases, most notably just a couple of days ago, the Edmonton Oilers fan base and how they reacted to the Andrew Mangiapane trade. There were some that were choosing to look at it with the narrow prism of they got off of a mistake and they got a couple of defensive forwards who can help us in the Stanley Cup playoff run. And there were others who were looking at it with a much broader lens of, oh my God, what a catastrophic signing Mangiapane was, and it costs us a first-round pick, and we only get a couple of fourth-line defensive forwards in return. And I think you can do the same here with this Conor Garland trade. If you want to look at it narrowly through the prism on the scale of how did they do in cutting their losses, I think you can make a case that this is a decent trade for the Vancouver Canucks. If you want to look at it more broadly in terms of how did they manage the asset that is Conor Garland, well, clearly signing that extension was a mistake. I think that brought down his value compared to what it could have been. Mm-hmm. And you convinced yourself that you needed to get off this mistake now, as opposed to playing it out a little later into June. So on that score, they mismanaged the asset. Blake, I am also sympathetic to some of the cries from Canucks fans about why didn't you take bad money back? Why couldn't you package it with another player to make them look better? We have had the subprime mortgages analogy on this show before, right? For those who remember The Big Short of 15 or so years ago. And that didn't happen here either. They just moved the player out, and they just moved him out for a couple of picks without getting creative in the trade.
And really, they don't have a terrible contract. They've got a guy like a Danton Heinen, at 2.25, but nothing there with term that they are desperate to get rid of. So that didn't really fit. And you have to believe.
Well, with them, Blake, it didn't. It fit with them.
No,
Remember,
totally.
Boston, the Islanders, New Jersey. There were a lot of other suitors out there, right?
Yeah, and you have to believe that came up, and you have to believe that the Vancouver Canucks weighed those options.
Like I would like to believe that, but as we have talked about, this management group, and they've made 40-some or 30-some trades, I believe. Rutherford and Alvin, there are very few, if any, creative trades. There are very few of any leveraging cap space. The only time that they have waded into those waters is when they have been the team having to pay someone to take a contract off their hand, like the case of Jason Dickinson, like the case of Ilya Mikheyev. So I would like to believe you, partner. I would like to think that they explored all of those scenarios with all the Garland suitors, but based on their history and the fact that they tend to make a little bit more straight arrow, courage of your conviction trades rather than trades leveraging cap space, contract term, and those sorts of commercial business considerations have been few and far between with this management group.
Well, let's pivot to the cap space then. Because of this trade in the here and now for the remainder 4 hours here that we have before the trade deadline, the Canucks have the fourth most amount of cap space in the entire National Hockey League, almost $13 million now of prorated space here for the Vancouver Canucks. So they can be, if anybody decides to get curious, they can be a warehouse for you to store bad contracts. They should be that. But in addition to that, Matt, not only in the here and now of the next few hours, going forward now for the next year or two, the Canucks have got scads of cap space. Remember, Evander Kane's coming off the books here, Bluger and Camp off the books as well. And the guys that they need to give raises to, at least next year, we're talking kibbles and bits here. We're talking about re-upping Victor Mancini. That's pretty much it. So the Vancouver Canucks should be willing to take on guys right now. They should be able to take on guys with 1 or 2 years left on
While
their
you
deal.
still can too, Blake,
Yes.
right? Because the cap is jumping each and every summer now by significant amounts. The whole process, the whole premise of taking on bad money and getting paid to do it, that's running thin, man. There's not many dinosaurs left here in this world. So go get it while you can. I wanted to get to this. Okay. The one thing you can absolutely praise the Vancouver Canucks for, stockpiling draft picks. They have finally, and many fans have been waiting for this for an awful long time, Blake. They are finally surplus draft picks in all of the upcoming drafts and quality picks as well. Of course, they have now added 4 second-round picks during the course of the last few months, going back to the 2 second-round picks they got from Kiefer Sherwood in the San Jose trade, 4 Kiefer Sherwood in the San Jose trade, the second-round pick they got from Dallas in the Tyler Myers trade, and now the second-round pick they get from Columbus in the Conor Garland trade. So there it is. Canucks News Summaries has it. For those of you listening or watching on visual platforms, it's the 2 firsts, the 2 seconds this upcoming year with the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th to boot. It is a first, 2 seconds, 2 fourths in the 2027 draft, and already in 2028 it is a first, 2 seconds, and 2 fourths. If anybody was worried about Canucks management and ownership understanding this could be a long road and you should long range this as well as trying to short term it, that part of the exercise has been understood in the managerial offices of Canucks Sports Entertainment.
Yeah, and yet I'm still wanting, right? Like especially we just talked about outside of the Canucks first round first pick, which promises to be a very good one and a player that if he's not in the lineup next year will be in a year and a half's time. But all of these players are projects, especially the second round players. We're still talking 2, 3, 4 years away for a second round pick to ripen. So for the Canucks to get, I would love them to get back into the first round here, either this year or next, and to get a player that might be able to drop in just a little bit sooner. And again, it's going to take some creativity. Like a Teddy Bluger alone is not going to get you
That's
a
not getting
first
it
round
done.
pick.
Yep.
But if they can find a way, and that might be, you just talked about the Mangiapane trade, doing something like that got a first round pick. So I think it would behoove them to try to do that.
Yeah, goodness gracious, yes. Especially at this stage of the game. I mean, they have now made 2 trades of vets with term. We said the rebuild doesn't begin. They don't completely win over the fan base in terms of their
give them credit for
genuineness on the rebuilds. Are they paying a lip service? Are they just going to try and touch bottom, come right back up because we're getting first overall? We're getting a fine player in this draft. This is now 2 consecutive trades of veterans with term for just draft picks and in most cases longer range draft picks. So that absolutely shows that they understand that this is going to be a longer term thing. Boy, if Carolina didn't have oodles of cap space, I would say, take on Kotkaniemi and take an asset with it. Alas, we'll see if there are those sorts of situations with paid vets, guys with term that contenders want to move off.
You talked about the lack of or the few remaining dinosaurs of the teams with the cap space. Here's the one other pressure though that mitigates that to a degree, and that is the playoff cap hit. And teams want to address the absolute purest lineup they can in
fair.
The playoffs. And knowing that they have to count every penny now in a playoff game, that guy that they're not too wild about, that doesn't get a ton of ice time, if they can move that guy on and replace him with somebody of quality, that's where the Canucks can help out.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. I want to bring this up because, of course, Conor Garland is the latest in what is a significant reformulating of the Vancouver Canucks roster and lineup in the Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin era, but not even from the jump, Blake. From less than 2 years ago when they played in Game 7 of the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs against Edmonton. This is our friend Vanessa here from the broadcast. Love the presentation here from Vanessa. That is the lineup, everybody, from round 2, Game 5 against the Oilers. Look at how many players are no longer here. And for those of you that are just listening, Suter, Miller, Lindholm, Joshua, Garland, Oman, although he's still here, not playing, DiGiuseppe, Podkolzin, Hughes, Soucy, Zadorov, Cole, Myers. 5 of the 6 defensemen, Blake, are gone. Both goaltenders are gone, too, in Archer Shilovs and Casey DeSmith.
And Teddy Bluger should be gone by the end of the day, too. So
fair enough, exactly. Well, and Blake, Besser and Patterson are they guaranteed to be Vancouver Canucks? So that's how it looks when you look at it from a projected lineup point of view. Here's the list version, courtesy of our friends from Big Head Hockey here. There are all the names that are gone from the Vancouver Canucks team that 2 years ago won the Pacific Division and advanced to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. There's Mikheyev and Lafferty's names are on that list, Blake. They were not in the lineup in Game 5, so it goes deeper. It goes deeper than that as well. Holy cow, have they turned over this group in the last couple of years? And the other thing we should explain, because for us, I mean, it was 9:30, whatever. It's a little late, but it's still most people are up, or I would feel comfortable calling someone at 9:30 at night. But of course, this breaks for the Columbus Blue Jackets at midnight, 12:30 Eastern, right,
Yeah.
Frank? Well, there's good reason for that. Here's Chris Johnston of The Athletic and TSN. Midnight Eastern yesterday is when the roster limit of 23 players disappeared. Once you get to trade deadline day, the only roster requirement for the NHL is for teams to be cap compliant. And I will give Patrick Alvin credit. He dropped us a breadcrumb a couple of days ago, Blake, when he talked about the difficulty of making trades and how some of it was roster space related, right? Remember when he pointed out, roster spots, and he mentioned even with his team, they've got a couple of guys sitting out that they hope to get in the lineup. So yes, that's why I think things came down as they did, not just for the Canucks, Blue Jackets, and Garland, but also on that Buffalo-Winnipeg trade last night of the two defensemen, including ex-Vancouver Canuck Luke Schenn.
And part of me wants them to back that date up and allow teams maybe another day or two to do this, but that's sort of what makes deadline day fun. It does force things onto deadline day. So I think for the sake of creating a frenzy, I think it's probably
there's a to and fro on that one, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like you, I can understand that both ways. All right, we're going to have a lot more on the regular edition of Sekeres and Price that's coming up a little later, noon Pacific time. We'll have Jeff Patterson, Patrick Johnson, Canucks reporters at the rink, and we'll see what else they do between now and then. But for now, Matt Sekeres, Blake Price, Mike Rogerson, signing off here from the Nation Network studios. Presentation of Bet365. Whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app, get in on the game. Use code NATION when doing so. Must be 19 or older. Please play responsibly.
See you at noon.